On May 31, 1223, along the banks of a modest river in modern-day Ukraine, a shadow of 8,000 warriors, primarily composed of mighty Rus princes and their Cuman allies, relentlessly drove a Mongol army numbering 20,000. For 9 consecutive days, they had relentlessly pursued their adversaries across 200 miles of vast steppes. Victory seemed assured, yet what unfolded next at the Kalka River became one of the most catastrophic military failures of the medieval era. This tale extends beyond a single confrontation, encompassing a 5,000-mile, 3-year odyssey led by 2 little-known military masterminds. How did a force of 20,000 horsemen manage to overcome an army 4 times its size? And how did this historically unprecedented reconnaissance mission ultimately shape the destiny of an entire continent? Before we delve deeper, please share your location and the current time in the comments below. To truly grasp this narrative, we must rewind to 1220. The Mongol Empire had just crushed Khwarezm, then one of Central Asia's most formidable powers. Cities like Bukhara and Samarkand had been razed. Shah Muhammad II fled in terror across Persia, so overcome by panic that he succumbed to exhaustion a year later. However, the intriguing aspect here isn't the brutality, but the strategic foresight involved. Genghis Khan adhered to a golden rule: never allow a threat to remain at your rear. When the Shah fled westward, Genghis Khan dispatched 2 of his most distinguished commanders, Jebe and Subutai, to pursue him. Their primary objective was to track down and eliminate the Shah. Yet, this mission transcended mere vengeance. Subutai, a 45-year-old son of a blacksmith with no noble lineage, had sought a unique concession from Genghis Khan: permission to continue pressing westward after fulfilling their mission, not for conquest, but for reconnaissance. Genghis Khan granted this request. This decision irrevocably altered European history, for it was not a mere raid, but the most extensive military intelligence operation of the Middle Ages. 20,000 riders covered 5,000 miles over 3 years, traversing the territory of 50 modern nations. Their ultimate goal? To ascertain whether Europe was ripe for conquest. Before we delve into their endeavors, it's crucial to understand who these 2 individuals were. Jeb, whose name means arrow, was not his birth name. In 1206, he was a warrior in the army of Genghis Khan's adversary. During a battle, he fired an arrow that struck Genghis Khan in the neck, nearly killing the great conqueror. However, his army was defeated. Taken prisoner, instead of pleading for mercy, he openly confessed, "It was I who shot you." Genghis Khan, rather than executing him, laughed and declared, "A man loyal to his lord, no matter who that may be, deserves respect." He was pardoned and given the new name Jebe, meaning arrow. From an enemy, he became one of Genghis Khan's 4 most famous dogs of war. Subutai, a genius from common stock, complemented Jebe perfectly. If Jebe represented the keen blade, Subutai embodied the strategic mind. Born in 1175, the son of a blacksmith named Jigudai, in an empire built upon noble pedigrees, a commoner's ascent to supreme command was virtually impossible. Yet Subutai was different. At 14, he voluntarily joined Genghis Khan's army, following in the footsteps of his elder brother Galema. He was appointed a guard of Genghis Khan's yurt, a humble position that afforded him the opportunity to listen in on all strategic discussions. Subutai famously stated to Genghis Khan, "I will defend you from your enemies as felt cloth protects a man from the wind." And he kept his word. At 22, he received his first command against the Merkit tribe. Instead of a frontal assault, Subutai feigned desertion, infiltrated the enemy camp, supplied them with false intelligence that caused them to lower their guard, and then coordinated with the main forces for a surprise attack. It was a complete victory. From then on, Subutai became Jeb's protege. They complemented each other flawlessly. Jeb, bold and resolute; Subutai, cautious and calculating. In 1220, when tasked with pursuing Shah Muhammad, they were more than just 2 generals. They were a flawless military machine. Their journey commenced in Persia during the winter of 1220. Shah Muhammad fled incessantly. Jeb and Subutai pursued him, but without haste, for they grasped something profoundly important. The pursuit of the Shah was merely a pretext. Their true objective was intelligence gathering. They meticulously studied the structure of Persian cities, charted trade routes, identified rival factions, assessed who could be bribed, and who would fight to the bitter end. Ray was plundered, Zanjan set ablaze. Kazvin was destined for the same fate, but upon reaching Tabriz, one of Persia's wealthiest cities, something curious occurred. Uzbek, the ruler of Azerbaijan, dispatched envoys with an offer of a colossal tribute in money, clothing, and, crucially, numerous horses. Subutai and Jeb accepted the proposition. Why? Because they had no need to destroy Tabriz, they needed supplies. By paying the ransom, the city unwittingly funded the remainder of their expedition. The Mongols were often misunderstood. Their nature wasn't consistently brutal, but rather highly strategic. If a city capitulated and proved useful, they spared it. However, resistance, like that shown by Hamadan, which initially surrendered and was then destroyed after attempting a second defiance, sent a clear message: cooperate to live, resist to perish. Early in 1221, Shah Muhammad II succumbed to exhaustion on a small island in the Caspian Sea. Despite this primary objective being achieved, Subutai and Jebe did not retreat. Instead, they advanced northward, invading Georgia, a robust Christian kingdom with long-standing military traditions. In January to February 1221, they confronted a Georgian-Armenian army of 30,000. Jebe orchestrated an ambush with 5,000 of his warriors, while Subutai's main force feigned a retreat. As the Georgian cavalry pursued and routed the Turkmen detachments, Jebe sprung the trap. King George IV suffered mortal wounds and soon died. Georgia was plundered. In March, the Mongols returned to Azerbaijan, besieging Moraga with calculated ruthlessness, employing captives as human shields in the vanguard of each assault. The city fell, and much of its populace was decimated. Next came the formidable task of traversing the Caucasus Mountains in winter. They reached Derbent, a crucial port. Rather than laying siege, Subutai initiated negotiations. "Grant us 10 guides to lead us through the mountains, and your city will be spared." The city agreed. To ensure the guides' loyalty, however, the Mongols executed one directly before the others, signaling their unwavering resolve. The journey through the Caucasus proved arduous, requiring the abandonment of siege engines and costing hundreds of lives to the biting cold. Yet upon emerging on the northern side, a new landscape unfolded: the Black Sea-Caspian steppe, homeland to nomadic tribes. Here, Subutai executed one of history's most brilliant diplomatic and military maneuvers. In the early months of 1222, on the northern slopes of the Caucasus, Subutai and Jebe faced a formidable coalition. The Alans, Circassians, and Kipchaks, also known as Cumans, numbering approximately 50,000 warriors. The 20,000 Mongol horsemen, weary from their mountain crossing, were outnumbered 2.5 to 1. Most commanders would shun such a battle, but Subutai was exceptional. He dispatched envoys to the Cumans with a direct message: "We are all nomads. We share a Turkic language and a common culture. Why would you fight for the Alans, sedentary people unlike us? Withdraw your forces, and we will share the spoils." The Cumans deliberated and ultimately consented. With the Cumans' withdrawal, the Alans and Circassians found themselves isolated. The Mongols attacked and defeated them individually. But then, an unexpected turn. Subutai pivoted and attacked the Cumans. "But we had an agreement," they cried. This was a harsh lesson. In warfare, promises are only binding as long as they remain advantageous. 2 Cuman armies were annihilated. The survivors, led by Khan Kutan, fled westward. This is where our story truly begins. In the spring of 1223, Khan Kutan arrived in Kiev. He brought not only gold, silver, precious eastern silks, and female slaves, but, more importantly, a grave warning. A strange army had crossed the Caucasus. They had defeated everyone in their path. "Today they have come for us. Tomorrow they will come for you." Kutan had familial ties to Kievan Rus. His daughter was married to Prince Mstislav Mstislavich Golitsky, a fierce warrior known as the Daring. Mstislav the Daring summoned the Rus princes. However, Kievan Rus was not a unified state, but a loose confederation of rival principalities. Kiev, under the rule of Mstislav II Romanovich, had once been the center of power, but had waned. The Galician-Volhynian Principality, led by Mstislav the Daring, was gaining strength. Chernigov, Smolensk, and the Vladimir Suzdal Principality each pursued their own interests, foreshadowing the impending disaster. While they debated, Subutai sent his first envoys. "We have no quarrel with Rus. This is a matter between us and the Cumans. They attacked us first. Leave them alone. We might even share the Cuman lands with you." This was a pragmatic offer, as Subutai knew his 20,000-strong army faced a potential alliance of 80,000. He wished to avoid this battle, at least for now. But the Rus princes made their first blunder. They killed the envoys. In Mongol culture, this was one of the gravest offenses, akin to Shah Muhammad's killing of Genghis Khan's envoys, which led to the destruction of an entire empire. Subutai dispatched a second delegation. "You killed our envoys, but here is one last chance. Retreat." The Rus princes responded by mobilizing their armies. 80,000 men, including heavily armored Rus cavalry, light Cuman cavalry with bows, and infantry armed with axes and spears. Though the written plans projected an overwhelming superiority, a significant flaw undermined this strength: the absence of unified command. Mstislav the Bold yearned for swift, aggressive, and decisive action, driven by impatience. Conversely, Mstislav II of Kiev advocated caution, urging them to merge forces, assess the adversary's capabilities, and then engage. Yet, neither held sway over the other, leading each prince to act independently. This disunity was precisely what Subutai anticipated. In early May 1223, the combined Rus-Polovtsian forces crossed the Dnieper River. This undertaking represented a colossal logistical feat, as 80,000 individuals traversed the river using boats lashed together to form temporary bridges. Their eastward march continued along the Zalazny Way through the steppes, where they encountered the Mongol army, specifically its rear guard. Subutai had strategically left a detachment of 1,000 warriors under Officer Hambek as bait. Mstislav the Bold, at the head of his cavalry, immediately surged across the river to attack this rear guard. Although Mongol arrows rained down, the Rus forces were simply too numerous. All 1,000 Mongols were annihilated, every last man. Was this a victory? The Rus certainly believed so. They celebrated with jubilation. However, this was precisely Subutai's objective, as Mstislav the Bold, intoxicated by an effortless triumph and an inflated sense of confidence, became convinced of the Mongols' weakness and timidity. Without waiting, he spurred his forces onward in pursuit, as the Mongols appeared to flee. Yet this was not a retreat born of fear, but a sophisticated tactical maneuver, a classic Mongol strategy known as the feigned retreat. For 9 days, covering 200 miles, the Mongol forces withdrew eastward, but they did not vanish. They conducted persistent, small-scale raids, striking from the flanks, unleashing volleys of arrows, slaying a few individuals, and then disappearing. They consistently avoided sustained engagements and denied the Rus the opportunity to consolidate their strength. This demonstrated a brilliant calculation. Each minor assault only intensified Mstislav's resolve to continue the chase. They are merely a little frightened, he presumed. But after 9 days traversing the steppe, supplies dwindled, horses were exhausted, and soldiers grew weary and irritable. The column stretched thin, with units moving at differing speeds. The 8,000-strong army ceased to be a cohesive unit, transforming into a lengthy, scattered train, its segments separated by miles. Crucially, they were blinded by the fervor of the pursuit. On May 30th, they reached the Kalka River, a small, shallow waterway. In Ukrainian history, it is commonly thought to be the modern Kalmius, which empties into the Azov Sea. Here, the situation dramatically shifted. At dawn on May 31st, 1223, Subutai and Jebe ceased their retreat. 20,000 Mongol horsemen arrayed themselves on the Kalka River's eastern bank. There would be no further withdrawal. They were poised for battle. Mstislav the Bold spotted them from the opposite bank. This was the moment he had eagerly awaited. He commanded his heavy cavalry to immediately cross the river. But this proved to be a second grave error. Mstislav II of Kiev, a more cautious commander, wished to await the entire army's consolidation before launching an attack. A tense military council ensued. Fierce arguments erupted, but no single individual possessed the authority to command unilaterally. Consequently, the army was fractured. Mstislav the Bold, along with the Polovtsian cavalry, crossed the river. Mstislav of Kiev remained behind, establishing a fortified camp on a nearby hill with wagons arranged in a circle and sharpened stakes. This was precisely what Subutai desired, a divided adversary. As the Rus heavy cavalry and the Polovtsian light cavalry forded the shallow Kalka, they were brimming with confidence. They charged head-on, aiming to breach the Mongol lines through sheer force and momentum. Initially, they managed to overwhelm the Mongol rearguard, scattering them and creating the illusion of a breakthrough. But this was yet another snare. Jebe and Subutai had positioned their forces to exploit such aggressive advances. While the Rus Polovtsian cavalry surged forward, the Mongol forces suddenly counterattacked from both flanks. The Mongols assailed with a ferocity chronicled as typical, both head-on and from the sides. Arrows rained down in a black torrent. Mongol cavalry swept forward with terrifying speed. The Polovtsians, encountering the same army that had previously routed them, immediately panicked and fled. As they retreated, they crashed directly into the Rus ranks behind them, triggering utter chaos. The Mongols surged into the resulting breach like water through a broken dam. The Rus vanguard was shattered before the second wave could even deploy on the battlefield. Mstislav the Bold, recognizing the catastrophe, attempted to withdraw. He and a portion of his cavalry managed to escape, retreating towards the Dnieper. 6 more princes perished during the pursuit back to the river, but Mstislav II of Kiev remained within his fortified camp. Subutai divided his forces. One part encircled Mstislav's camp, while the others pursued the fleeing army. Mstislav's camp held a strong defensive position, protected by the circle of wagons and sharpened stakes. The uphill ground proved too steep for the Mongol cavalry, compelling the invaders to dismount and engage on foot. Russian defenders, sheltered behind their wagons and stakes, managed to repel wave after wave of assault. The Mongols attempted to hook and pull away the wagons, while the Russian soldiers stabbed and hacked at them from above. With their shields and wagons providing cover, the Russians effectively fended off Mongol arrows. For 3 days, the Mongol forces launched attacks, and for 3 days, Mstislav II held his ground. However, the Mongol commanders eventually offered terms for surrender. "We will allow you to depart unharmed if you relinquish your weapons, banners, and possessions," they proposed. Exhausted, hungry, and without prospect of reinforcements, Mstislav II accepted. This proved to be his final miscalculation. As the Russians discarded their weapons and emerged, they were immediately bound hand and foot. The Mongols showed no mercy. Mstislav II and his 2 sons-in-law were forced to the ground. Wooden planks were placed over them, upon which Subutai, Jeb, and other senior Mongol commanders ascended to celebrate their victory with a feast. While the Mongol leaders reveled, the bodies of the 3 Russian princes were crushed beneath the weight of the gathering. Why such a barbaric execution? According to Mongol beliefs, royal blood was sacred and could not be spilled. Yet, they still sought to punish, finding a method of killing without bloodshed. This was a clear message: never trust the promises of those who have already broken their word. As May 31, 1223, drew to a close, the steppes surrounding the Kalka River were littered with corpses. Russian chronicles report that 90% of the warriors did not return home, with only 1 in 10 surviving. From an initial force of 80,000, roughly 8,000 remained alive. 12 Russian princes perished, 3 were executed, and 6 fell during the chaotic retreat towards the Dnieper. Mongol casualties, according to sources, were remarkably low, possibly numbering in the hundreds. However, one significant loss was that of Jebe. Historians theorize that Jebe sacrificed himself, commanding a 1,000-strong rearguard that was completely annihilated, to lure the Russians into a trap. If true, It was a calculated sacrifice, 1,000 men for the destruction of 80,000. Subutai continued his campaign alone, raiding the region and defeating the army of the Volga Bulgars, along with another Cuman detachment. By 1224, he rejoined Genghis Khan and the main Mongol army. His mission was accomplished, and then some. The entire expedition covered 5,500 miles over 3 years, making it the longest cavalry raid in history. Subutai brought back immense plunder, invaluable intelligence on the geography, politics, and military strength of Western nations, and proof that Europe was conquerable. 15 years later, in 1237, the Mongols returned. This time, led by Subutai and Batu, Genghis Khan's grandson, at the head of an army exceeding 100,000 men. This was no mere raid, but a full-scale conquest. Over 3 years, they subdued Kiev, Chernihiv, Galicia, Volhynia, and the Vladimir Suzdal Principality. They then advanced into Poland, Hungary, and reached the gates of Vienna. All of this was made possible by the reconnaissance gathered during the 1220 to 1224 campaign. So what lessons can we draw from this historical account? Lesson 1. Information is the most potent weapon. Subutai fought not only with swords, but with knowledge. Before every battle, he understood the terrain, the enemy's habits, who were allies and who were foes, and the political strengths and weaknesses of his adversaries. In today's world, this remains equally pertinent. Whether building a business, a career, or a life, an individual with superior information makes the best decisions. Lesson 2. Unity confers strength. Disunity leads to defeat. The Russian-Cuman alliance outnumbered the Mongols by 4-1, yet it lacked unified command. Each prince acted independently. The Mongols, though fewer in number, possessed a clear hierarchy. Everyone understood their role, and everyone adhered to the plan. The outcome: 20,000 disciplined warriors crushed 80,000 disunited ones. In organizations, families, and teams, cohesion matters more than sheer numbers. Lesson 3. Patience triumphs over haste. Mstislav the Daring sought a quick victory. He rushed across the river, pursuing the enemy for 9 days without pause or foresight. Subutai was prepared to sacrifice 1,000 men, retreat 200 miles, and await the perfect moment to strike. Who emerged victorious? The patient one. In life, we often desire immediate results, but significant success demands strategic patience. Lesson 4. Humility unlocks opportunities. Subutai was the son of a blacksmith. In a lineage-based society, he should have had no prospects, yet he refused to let his origins restrict him. He worked diligently, he learned, and he proved his worth. And Genghis Khan, a leader who valued merit above birthright, gave him that chance. Today, we possess more opportunities than at any previous point in history. Your background no longer dictates your destiny as it once did, but you must still put in the effort. To demonstrate his worth. Lesson 5. Never underestimate your adversary. The Rus princelings regarded the Mongols as mere barbarians from the steppes. They were convinced that their superior numbers and armor would suffice. They erred gravely. The Mongols represented the most sophisticated military strategists of their era. They orchestrated troop movements across vast distances, coordinating armies separated by hundreds of miles. Their tactics encompassed reconnaissance, diplomacy, and psychological warfare. You should never judge anyone by their outward appearance. Treat every rival with respect. Absorb knowledge from everyone. And here's the primary takeaway I wish for you to grasp from all this. History transcends a mere compilation of dates and occurrences. It is a narrative of human choices made under challenging conditions. Subutai could have remained a blacksmith, yet he opted for military service. Mstislav the Bold could have exercised patience, but chose haste. The Rus princes had an opportunity to unite, but instead they succumbed to arrogance. These pivotal decisions, made at critical junctures, shaped the destiny of countless individuals for centuries to follow. Presently, you confront decisions of your own. While perhaps not on the grand scale of historical conflicts, their significance remains undiminished. What choices will you make? If you found this content engaging, Please like, subscribe to our channel, and activate notifications so you don't miss future compelling historical accounts. Additionally, share in the comments which lesson from Subudi's campaign and the Battle of Kalka resonated with you the most. Thank you for watching.